So this is the Wikipedia page for PLDs, and if you look through these pages, the things that we have seen so far, you will be able to see PLA, PAL, and another version called GAL, which I have not discussed. Then comes CPLD. You can say that they are arranged in the order of increasing complexity. CPLD we have seen already. So it contains simple PLDs like PAL and PLAs, and they are connected together to form complex PLDs. And then we have what is called as FPGA. Okay, so that is what I want to discuss. So let's go. I hope you can see my screen. So we will discuss about the architecture of an FPGA. So if you look at what is the full form of FPGA, I think I mentioned it in the last class. FPGA stands for Field Programmable, then Gate Array. Okay, Field Programmable Gate Array. Now by field we do not mean electromagnetic field or anything like that. We are actually meaning on the field of application. Okay, so wherever this chip is going to be used, so it may be part of a bigger system, and it may be under operational mode, and there on the site in the field of application you are able to program it or reprogram it. Okay, so that its functionalities can be altered even after deploying the chip in as a part of a big system. Okay, so that gives an advantage, and that is why FPGAs are very popular. So field programmable, so on the site after it is deployed you can still make changes in the configuration. Configuration means how the components inside are basic components, programmable logic components, how they are interconnected, that you can still make changes so that you can change the functionality of the chip according to your desire. And gate array is basically because of the term comes because of the way in which the hardware is arranged inside. It is in the form of an array, as you can see. So just like we have seen in the last class about complex PLDs, so complex PLD has the basic building block, which is basically called the programmable part is called macro cell, and then that macro cell, many of the macro cell is basically the simple PLDs, and many such things are combined together to create what is called logic array block. Okay, LAB we have seen, and then many logic blocks are arranged in a similar fashion. Okay, they are arranged in the form of an array, but if you look at that array, it may be like a there may be only two columns, or the number of elements in the array, or the number of blocks in the array, which is the LAB blocks, logic array block, the number of them are quite limited, whereas when you come to FPGA it's a huge number. Okay, the number of rows and the number of columns. So that is one major difference you will see between complex PLDs and FPGA. FPGA is more versatile or more capable to handle bigger logic system inside it. Even you can carry a processor inside FPGA. You can put the processor. You can make a processor by making appropriate configuration. So FPGAs are these days they are very huge, and the number of transistors in them are like very large compared to even the best high-end processor which are right now available. For example, i9, Intel's i9 chip So if you look at the number of transistors inside Intel's i9 chip, it is something like which is going to be launched this 2021. It is said that it is going to have something like 15 billion transistors inside it. Okay, whereas and similarly, if you look at the Mac processor, that is your Apple computer processor, that will also contain something like 10 to 20 billion transistors. But the recent FPGA, I have some data here from the website, so I was just looking at it. So if you look at the Xilinx website, you will see something like this. This is a news article from 2019, and you can see that they are talking about something like 35 billion transistors, okay, in an FPGA chip, which is the most recent chip. So it's only this much, but you can see a reference with respect to the coin that is there. So compared to that coin, it's of the order of the size of a coin, but it has got 35 billion transistors inside, much more than what a Pentium or not Pentium, the i7 Intel i7 or i9 chip would carry. i7 would be something like 3.5 billion transistors, but the most recent i9 chip, it has something like 15 billion transistors. So it's huge number of components inside, and it has high capability. So that's why I said you can even have a processor, but of course you won't be able to make a i9 processor, which I said, inside this, because the whatever design that you want to implement inside an FPGA chip, it has to be configured. So for helping the configuration, you need a lot of overhead transistors and other hardware that we will look at today. Okay, so that's what we are talking about. But of course, if you look historically, it started with a smaller architectures, and then it got refined as time went on. Okay, so I just showed you the current status, but if you look into the FPGA architecture, the basic thing, the structure that you would see is that it has got this something called CLB. CLB stands for configurable logic block. Okay, so that is analogous to your LAB in CPLD that we have seen in the last class. So that is where you put the logic. It has some kind of architecture which can be configured to function as a Boolean expression. Okay, it can generate a, say, 4-bit input you give, and then it can generate any Boolean function, or maybe nowadays it may be like 10-bit input you give, and then you can generate any Boolean function, either combinational or sequential, which depends upon those 10 variables. Okay, so that is the capability of CLB. So the programming of the logic is actually done in the lower level inside this configurable logic block. And then you have what is called as the second part, the most important part, and the one which takes a large amount of area inside the FPGA, is this purple lines which I am showing. Now what are these purple lines? These purple lines are basically interconnection networks. Okay, so that means you just cannot contain a big logic implementation in one CLB. It has to be distributed across in many CLBs. So these CLBs have to be connected in a particular fashion according to the logic that we want to make inside the FPGA, and therefore we need to route the connection between one CLB to the other. Okay, from one CLB it may act as an input, and then say for example this will act as this is one, and it has some output that has to be going into another CLBs. Okay, and its output may come back as input to this, and it is not just one or two lines. These are like multiples of lines, tens and hundreds of lines, inputs and outputs are going back and forth in order to connect. So some of the part of a particular blocks, for example you are making a floating point adder, so some of this block will be part of that circuit will be in this CLB1, and then it goes to CLB2, and then the last part may be in CLB3. So CLB1, 2, 3 may together implement that design. So there has to be a programmable routing network which can establish this connection. So that is achieved by these purple lines. So the three major components, so one I said it is the CLB, and second major component is so CLB is also programmable. Okay, so programmable logic block or control configurable logic block, so you can say in both ways. The second is programmable routing, or routing means directing the connections between one CLB and the other CLB, or you can route it to the external output pins of this FPGA, which I have shown earlier. So all around the chip there will be pins coming out. There would be 500 pins maybe coming out of this chip. So some of the things you may need to take it out. So some of the inputs may be taken in from an external world. So this has to be routed accordingly. Okay, so now the third block, as you can see here, is the IO block. Okay, IO block. So I stands for input, O stands for output. So IO block means input output blocks, which can either be connected to the CLB or it can be connected to these programmable routing wires, so that it may reach some other CLB which is interior in the chip. So these are the three major components. Now whatever material, the figures that I am showing here are taken from this particular book here. Okay, Farooq tree-based heterogeneity. It's a book explicitly on FPGA architecture, but we are only looking at the introductory part of that book, and I have taken all these diagrams from it. I will share a copy of this chapter that I am referring to. All right, so now how can you configure two things? How can you configure or program these CLBs so that a particular Boolean function can be implemented inside it, and also how can you program the connections? So there is a connections, like they are crossing each other, whether they should be connected or should not be connected. So there should be a capability to either make or break the connection. So that is also programmable. That's why we say programmable routing. Okay, so to say this 80 to 90% of the area is actually dedicated for these purple lines. Okay, so they consume. So they are not just wires, but wires along with a lot of switches which are implemented with the help of transistors. And each of those transistors which are supposed to connect or disconnect the crossing wires, they are programmable. So there is a programmable logic there. And how is it can be programmed? And a similar thing exists for CLBs also. So how are these programmabilities achieved? So there are three ways in which you can program it. So there are therefore three types of programmability that you can achieve, and they are basically: number one, which is the most popular programming approach, that is involving what is called as the static memory. So the three ways programming technologies, if you look at, so there are three types. One that uses what is called as a static random access memory. We have studied, I think, this in our digital electronics class, but I have the circuit here. Okay, so this is SRAM, or static random access memory. Okay, I hope you know. It's basically a volatile memory. Only when the power is on, it will hold the data, 0 or 1. A single SRAM cell is shown here. Okay, memory cell. So it can hold either 1 or 0, and only when the power it is connected to the power supply. And the second way in which you can program these connections or CLBs is by using what we have studied in the previous class, which is flash memory. Remember, it is also called as electrically alterable probe. Okay, so you can use that also. And the advantage of using flash memory is that even after the power goes, the content inside the flash memory remains, right? Like your pen drive we were talking about. So it is used for storing data, so you don't need to supply power to it. Without power also it will keep the data, whereas SRAM, it is volatile, it will not store the information in the absence of power. And the third is basically what is called as anti-fuse. So fuse, everybody knows. So fuse is what? Usually to limit the current in a circuit, we use fuse, and it will break the connection by blowing up a very thin piece of wire, which gets heated up when high current pass through it, and as a result the connection will be broken. Now anti-fuse means you can maybe initially, to start with, the connection is not established, but then you can do the opposite, where you can establish the connection, but this is not reprogrammable. So you take the FPGA chip, then the whole structure is available to you, and then you want to implement a particular circuit. You did everything for the initial process, like synthesis, everything, and then finally you will download it into the FPGA chip, and the connection will be made by creating certain, anti-fusing certain potential connections, which are the switches which are there. And once you make the connection, then it is permanent. You can't change it. Okay, so it's like one time able to program. You can program it only one time, whereas flash and SRAM, you can program it multiple number of times. Especially SRAM, you can program infinite number of times. Flash, you are not able to program it infinite number of times, but there is a lifetime, say maybe like some 10,000 times you can program, and after that maybe it will not work. So there is a reliability limit for flash memories. And another comparison feature is basically this additional circuit, whether it is compatible with the regular fabrication steps for making chips in a VLSI chips, for example the CMOS technology. So if you look at that, then SRAM is making use of basically CMOS transistors, and there is nothing more than that here, and therefore it is very much compatible with the regular fabrication process steps, whereas the flash, it has got some special transistor, which is like floating transistors. So those transistors are not conventional, and therefore integrating that technology with the regular CMOS technology may be a challenge, and therefore the cost of fabrication for flash memories or integrating flash memory with these other CMOS technology part involve more cost, and antifuse is entirely a different technology. It doesn't come under the regular CMOS technology, so that also will involve cost, but the biggest disadvantage is that it is only one time programmable. So out of these three, the most popular is the SRAM based configuration. So what is SRAM based configuration? So if you have like a CMOS like this, so this is like point A and point B, which you want to either connect or disconnect. Okay, so disconnect means A and B are not connected. The other ways you can do is like A and B are connected together. Okay, the switch is closed here, the switch is closed, and the switch is open here. Okay, so switch is open here, the switch is closed here. Now how do we do that? You just need to give a single bit to the gate. So if the gate is 0, if it is an NMOS transistor, if the input to the gate is 0, then it will be acting as an open switch. If the input to the gate is 1, then it will act as a closed switch. So all you need to do is basically to put the appropriate value, whether it's 0 or 1, according to your requirement, whether you want to close the switch, the MOS switch, or open the MOS switch. Okay, so from where do you get this? So this input that you give here has to remain there for a particular architecture. So therefore we use a static RAM. So the output of this static RAM is what we connect to G. Okay, so there is a so while programming, what actually we do is to put the data into the memory, the static memory. So each static RAM, which consists of the 6 transistors, which hold that data. If you put 0 there, this bit will be 0. If you put 1 there, the bit will be 1, and this static RAM will hold that data there. As long as the power is there, it will hold that data. So when you download the program into the FPGA for configuration, so what we are actually doing is giving inputs to each of these RAM cells. So these RAM cells will hold zeros and 1, and accordingly the switch will be either open or closed, and that will make or break the connection between the wires which are crossing for routing, or inside the CLB also it will make changes in order to generate a particular Boolean function. So let us first look at how it is done. How it is done for configuring the. Okay. So this is the inner details. Okay. The newer version of CLBs would be much complicated than this, but this is like an introductory block diagram of CLB, configurable logic block. Now this is just one simple part of the CLB. So CLB may be built upon one or multiple number of what is called as the basic logic element. Just like we said yesterday, in the CPLD we have what is called as macro cells, and inside one logic array block we can have more than one macro cells. Okay, so similar approach here also. So we have what is called as basic logic element, BLE, and you can have multiple BLEs inside one CLBs. Okay, so there could be 8 BLEs, that is basic. So you can see here basic logic element. There could be one. If it is a simple structure, there could be only one, but if it is a more complex FPGA architecture, then there could be multiple, or say 8 or 10 or whatever number of BLEs inside one CLB. Okay, now what is a BLE? If you look at the architecture of this BLE, it has got 3 parts. The number 1 part is basically called lookup table. Okay, LUTs. So LUT4 means it's a lookup table which can take 4 inputs, So in this diagram you can see that it is I0, I1, I2, as you can see here, I0, I1, I2, I3. These are the 4 inputs. Now if you look closely to this LUT part, LUT4 means 4 input, LUT3 means there are 3 inputs. Now in LUT4 is this diagram is something that we have already seen in a previous class, okay, when we discussed the multiplexer based maybe the first lecture that I took, where I discussed how can you implement a Boolean function with the help of multiplexers, okay, and we started with a particular Boolean function, and then it had some 3 variables, and then we wrote it as say ABC as input, and then I think we implemented the full order carry, and I think one of them I gave you as an assignment, and the other one I have implemented in the lecture time itself. And what the procedure we took was basically we have expanded that function in such a way that we could write it as say C, one of the variable, into some function of so like that. Suppose f is the function that you want to implement. By the way, how many different function can be implemented with 3 input variables? What is the total number of functions that you can implement? I think we have discussed this in our digital class. How many different logic function with the 2 input I have shown in the class? We could have 16 logic functions, right? With 1 bit input you can have 4 logic functions which are possible. So can you tell me how many logic functions are possible with 3 input variables? No, with 2 input variables we can implement 16 Boolean functions, okay? 64. No. So how do you get, for example, with the 2 variables, for example A, B, okay, so you can have various combination for this, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0 and 1, 1, right? With the 2 variables you can have this many combinations possible. Now you can have the output of A and B, the output of A and B, that means the function implemented which depends upon A and B can have, if you write the truth table for 2 input functions, you can put either 0 or 1 here, right? You can put 0 or 1 here, you can put 0 or 1 here. These are independently you can put in irrespective of what you put in the other places. So there is a 2 ways you can do this, 2 ways you can do this, 2 ways you can do this, and 2 ways you can do this. So the total number of function that you could implement is 2 into 2 into 2 into 2. Okay, you get that? So how many 2's are there? There are 2 raised to 3, sorry, 2 raised to 2. There are how many positions? So this is how much? This is 2 raised to 4, right? 2 into 2, that is 2 square, then 2 cube, and 2 raised to 4. So this is how you find out. So each positions, first of all the number of position is 2 raised to n. So here the number of input is n equal to 2. So you can write it as 2 square, 2 square, that is 4. So this, if this is n equal to 2, so this will be 4 possibilities, and each of the 4 possibilities you are so you are basically taking the power of 2 to this value, okay? So 2 raised to 2 raised to 2. So similarly for n equal to 3 you will have 2 raised to 8, which is basically 2 raised to 3. You are getting what I am saying? So this is going to be 256. So with the 3 input variables you can have 256 Boolean functions possible, Why? Because with the 3 input variables, small n equal to 3, you can have how many rows here? You can have 8 rows here, okay, and in each row you can have 2 different ways which are independently you can decide. So 2 is raised to the power of 8, so that is 256. So out of this 256 possible Boolean functions, you should be able to so here there are 4 inputs, so there will be out of 2 raised to 16 functions are possible, which is huge number. Out of that we should be able to configure any of that particular function that you want this particular BLE to be implementing. Okay, so how do we do that? We basically expand. I'm just showing an example here. So we have done this already. You take any variable a bar and then multiply it with the f of 0 BC, then plus a. If a is 1, then it will be f of 1 BC. So 0 and 1 are constants, so you will get a function of b and c, and if you put 1 here, you will get a different function. If you get a equal to 0, you get a separate function. And then this thing you can continue. In the next step you can basically take b equal to 0, so b bar into f of say 0 0 c. So it's a function of c only now. Okay, when you put these two zeros for a and b, then you will get a function of c, then plus b into f of 0 1 c, and plus a into something else. Okay, so like that you have to expand. So when you expand, finally in the next step, if you do one more expansion, you will get so if I continue this, let me just remove this here. So let me show you one more step, the final step. I will not write all the terms, I will only write the first term. So a bar, b bar, and then we have f of c, which I can write it as c bar into c bar into f of 0 0 0, and next will be a bar, b bar, c into f of 0 0 1. Okay, so this f of 0 0 0 means what is the truth table. When you put all 4 zeros, what is it could be 0 or it could be 1. If it is a 0, then so suppose these are multiplexers 0 1 0 1 0 1 0 1. So this is 4 input. So for I0 0, I1 0, I2 0, these are like the select inputs. Okay, then all of them are 0. Whatever is stored here will come out, right? That is the multiplexer based design. So a bar, b bar, c bar, okay, will be chosen if there are only 3 inputs, and this whatever is this value, whether it is 0 or 1, you have to put it here. So if I write it in terms of 4 input variables, where this is your I3, I2, I1 and I0. Okay, so this all of them are 0 means the first whatever is stored. So here there will be a 0 or 1 depending upon this function truth table. Okay, so another way we can say is that if you look at the canonical SOP form, the min terms, if it is present, you have to put a 1 there. If it is not present, you put a 0 there. So accordingly, so depending upon the truth table of the function that you want to implement, you have to put 0 or 1 corresponding to the selection of that input line. Okay, so this is what is called as lookup table or LUT. If it is 4 inputs, you say LUT4, it's function of 4 variable, and this is very much the same as what we have discussed the multiplexer design. So you just need to expand. If the Boolean function is given, you just need to expand it iteratively like this. If the truth table is given, there is nothing more to be done. You just put zeros and ones. If minterms are given, the canonical minterms are given, and then what you need to put is, if the minterm is present, you put 1, otherwise you put 0 there. So in that way you can implement it. So out of the 2 raised to say 16 possible functions, you will select a particular function out of that. So you need to give zeros and ones here, and from where do we give that? We give that from the output of this SRAM cell. So this is one way, or if you do it from the flash memory, so that is alternate way, or you could have a permanent connection to power supply 0 or ground by using anti-fuse technology. So any of this technology you can use for programming, but the preferable approach is that you will be able to program enormous number of times, so that the same hardware is remain useful over a larger period of time, okay, larger lifetime. So that is why SRAM technology is most preferred. Now again, going back to this, so I said inside a CLB there could be multiple. So here there is an example that is given. Okay, the CLB consists of 4 BLEs. Okay, so you can see that BLE1, BLE2, BLE architecture we have seen. Okay, I did not explain it full. I only told you about the first part, which is LUT, and then you have a clock. So if you want a sequential circuit to be implemented, you need to have a register. The clock is given to the register, and then it will be latched, say a D flip-flop. It will be stored there, and if you don't want a sequential circuit but a combinational circuit, by using that part of BLE, and then you just bypass the register, and so the clocked output can be selected using a multiplexer here, 2x1 multiplexer. If you take it from this point, it is just the combinational output. You take it from this point, that is a registered output. That is like if the flip-flops are to be there part of your system digital logic design, then you take it from the clocked output, which is the storage element. Okay, so this is basically a flip-flop, a D-type flip-flop, you can see. So these are the 3 parts of BLE. Okay, LUT, then register, then a multiplexer which can choose from direct output or clocked output. Alright, so many of such BLEs can be put in together inside a CLB. So CLB is basically consisting of many such BLEs. Okay, and the output of a BLE can be brought in just like what we saw in the case of a simple like macro cells. I told you that there also the PAL or the simple PLD output can be taken back as input, so that we can incorporate more complicated or more number of the function that depends upon more number of minterms. Okay, there I told like that. So similarly here also you can have more complex function implemented if the output of one BLE is available at the input of the other BLEs. Okay, so that type of feedback is also there, and then lot of inputs are coming. I told you it's not just 1 or 2 input, there are tens of inputs that are coming, and from CLB there are many outputs, but each BLE has only one output. From where do it come? It comes from the multiplexer output. Okay, either it could be through the register, or it could be directly taken out of LUTs. Okay, there is only one output for BLE. So depending if there are 4 BLEs inside a CLB, then you will have 4 output coming out of the CLB, but the number of inputs will be huge, because you see each BLE can take say 4 input, which we have seen, and if there are 4 BLEs, there will be 16, and this is just one example, but in reality it could be like 16 BLEs inside one CLB, etc. So that way you can implement more complicated function. Okay, so now if you look more detail into the architecture, the basic architecture, then you can see so as I told you, the routing part, okay, the programmable routing part, which is now shown in more detail in this diagram, has large amount of area, 80 to 90%. CLB only take say 15% of the entire chip, but the rest of the thing is actually used for routing and also for taking output. So so if you look at the routing part, so here the purple ones are basically the CLBs, but then you have in the routing part there are two additional blocks which are now shown in detail, and that is basically SB. And what is SB? SB is basically switch box, and the other is basically connection box. So there are two types of routing that is done. One is basically using the switch box, and the other is by using the connection box. Now what's the difference between switch box connection or switch box and connection box? Okay, so in order to understand that, so let's look into the inner detail of this switch box. So here is a more detailed structure of switch box. So there are a lot of vertical and horizontal lines which are passing by, right? They are crossing each other, and when they cross each other, if you want to connect one particular line with another line, so for example this line, which is the horizontal line, if you want to connect it to this vertical line, so that we want to have a 90-degree turnaround. Okay, so that is required. For example, if say this CLB has to come to this CLB, so for that so if or let me say this CLB has to go to this CLB. Okay, so this way, if it has to go, then this wire has to turn it around by 90 degree. So this type of connection should be there. There is a lot of details inside this, how that connection is established and all. So it is basically a connection between the horizontal and vertical wires, okay, which is passing through it. So all the SBs have horizontal wires and vertical wires, and depending upon how you want to program the routing, so you have to connect these wires, okay, which are horizontal and vertical. So that is what is done in the switch box. Now what about the connection box? So connection box, if you look at it, is between two CLBs, okay, the configurable logic block, one, say for example 1 and 2. So between them we have this. So it is basically the output of the CLBs are connected into the wire line. Okay, output of the CLB has to be connected into the wire line, and then so then only it will be available in the routing lines. Okay, so you have to make a connection to the wire line. So that is done by CLB to the routing architecture or routing line is done through connection box, whereas horizontal and vertical wires are connected by using switch box. So that is basically the difference, but both are programmable. You can make or break connection by using again either SRAM or anti-fuse, or you could do that with floating point memory or what you call flash memory. Okay, so the same things are possible there. So now if you look at here, you can see some of the interior details. Okay, so this connection could be bidirectional or it could be directional. Directional means only data can be going from one side to the other side. If bidirectional means it's like to and fro. You can send this can act as input, and after connection this will be output, or the other way. So that means data will flow this way, but if you want the data to go this way, it has to this will act as input and that will be acting as output. So if both of this, if you want to have in a particular connection, so then you require a bidirectional connection, or if you want only one directional data flow, then you can use a different type of connection, which is a directional connection. So if you look into this, so this is basically a switch box which is establishing connection between horizontal and vertical line as shown here. So you can see that there is a multiplexer. So if you take one particular, say there are 4 lines which are vertical and 4 lines which are horizontal, and there is a point at which one vertical crossover, another horizontal, and if you look at that point, so if you take this as the reference line, okay, either it may be an input or output. So if you take it as an input, this input could go this way, it could go straight this way, or it could go this way. There are 3 different ways it can go into. So there is a multiplexer here which with the 3 input lines, depending upon which way you want to route it. So so you have to have a 2 select input here, and that select input may be 0 0 0 1 and 1 0. So depending upon that, one of these output lines will be chosen, and the output will be available at the buffer, and buffer can be enabled and disabled, that is also by using another SRAM cell. So all these points are requiring an SRAM cell. Each SRAM cell has 16 transistors, so that is why it requires enormous number of transistors. The recent chip I told you, it has 35 billion transistors inside. So every place you require transistors to create SRAM, and then these switches itself are made by using this, because multiplexers, buffers, all this require transistors. Okay, so one of the 3 output, it can be routed, and since it is bidirectional, the same thing goes to the other side also. If this is an output and you may be getting input from other direction, so there are 3 other multiplexer, 3x1 multiplexer which are available. So in short, I want to conclude this, the steps that involve in designing or making a circuit inside an FPGA chip. Like it involves, first of all, you write the Verilog or VHDL code, which you started doing, and we will continue to do more of that. And then the next step is logic synthesis. Now the logic synthesis will basically generate the logical gate level netlist. Okay, so here you are basically giving the program as the input, Verilog program, the code, and then logic synthesis software will generate the gate level netlist. It involves basically the basic components like logic gates, flip-flops, multiplexers, so such type of building blocks in order to create the circuit, the gate level circuit for your particular program. And then the next step is technology mapping. Okay, so if you want to make a so here comes the difference. Okay, so it could be so many different ways now it can go after. So for this particular FPGA chip, you have a particular technology mapping. If you take another FPGA 2, so I told you there are various companies like Xilinx, Altera of Intel, they fabricate, each of these companies have several FPGAs, so FPGA 3, etc. Okay, so for each of them the availability of hardware is different, the configurable hardware is different, so you need to map the gate level netlist to your appropriate FPGA. Okay, if you want to fabricate an ASIC chip, again it is going to be different where you want to fabricate it. Okay, so like you want to fabricate in say Taiwan, or you want to fabricate in Korea, so the fab lab will have certain capabilities. Accordingly you have to use your technology mapping. Okay, so they will provide, so in this case it is FPGA, depending upon which FPGA you want to download this program, accordingly you have to do the technology mapping so that the capability inside this FPGA will be utilized. And then after that the next step is packing. Packing is basically like you need to say, for example, your big design will contain different modules inside, and each module may be put across so many CLBs or BLEs, etc. So how many BLEs are required for a one particular sub block? So that need to be basically clustered. Okay, so different clusters will be there. So that is what we clustering. Packing is basically clustering the design into different sub components, and then each of the sub components will be implemented by some one or few number of CLBs. So that will be done, and then you have to decide where you are going to place, whether these three PLDs will be one first cluster, and then maybe this will be the second cluster, and third will be somewhere here. So that you have to place inside the chip, and then once you place it, then you have to route it. Okay, all the routing part, and finally everything you made a design, and appropriate data into the SRAM has to be downloaded. The bit that you need to store in order to establish those hardware, configure the hardware, it has to be loaded into the chip. So that loading part is the final part. Just like when you load the Arduino with your program, similar way you load the bit stream into the basically you are putting data into the SRAM here. Okay, if you are using an SRAM technology for programming, so that will establish the connection. As long as the power is there, the circuit will remain, but if the power goes, it is volatile, everything gone. So again, when you switch on the system, something like booting, you have to do every time this downloading and putting in there. So that is the disadvantage of SRAM based technology. It is volatile. But if you don't want to program it large number of times, you can use flash memory technology for programming, and that way it will remain. You don't need to boot it every time. Alright, so this is basically the architecture of FPGA, and if you look into the website of Xilinx, if you go here, you can see various of their products. So here, and then devices, if you look at FPGAs is one of their major focus. They fabricate lots of FPGA. The high-end FPGA which I talked with you, the news article which I showed you, that is this this one. Okay, it's Virtex. Virtex is highest capable generation of FPGA. They usually have three categories: Artix, Kintex, and Virtex. Virtex has large capabilities. I mean, it has big architecture. Artix is the smallest version, and they fabricate them either using 16 nanometer technology, 20 nanometer. So this is the timeline. This is the newest. Before that it was 20 nanometer. Before that it was 28. Before that it was Spartan series. Okay, Spartan 1, 2, 3, like that there were. But that is now getting obsoleted. But these are the new series. So depending upon, for a student project, Artix is good enough, and even you can buy some of the cheap Artix FPGA kits which are not high ends. You can buy for say something like 8,000, 9,000 rupees also. You will get this FPGA, and you can do very nice project with that. Okay, and one final thing, if you go back to this the Wikipedia page, if you read through this page, then there is one paragraph about the difference between CPLDs and FPGA. The difference between FPGA and CPLD is FPGAs are internally based on lookup table. So that is the programmable logic part, whereas in CPLDs we have already seen it is basically AND array and OR array, right? AND array and OR array, which is creating the sum of the product terms. So AND array and OR array, they are called the simple PLD. So PLA, PAL, all this type of thing. And the CPLDs are meant for simpler design, while FPGAs are meant for complex design, more complex design, and that is another difference. And in general, CPLDs are good choice for wide combinatorial logic application, combinational circuit, and FPGAs are good for implementing state machine. Okay, so that's what we are going to go into the next class. We will look into the design. We have already seen in digital class, but we will look at again the details of design of state machines. Okay, and from state machine, finite state machine, we will go into what is called as the RTL architecture, which I have not covered in your digital class, but we need to look at it. That is very important for the front end part of the VLSI design, digital VLSI design. Okay, so I will close here. The time is coming to an end.